the mindset, the courage, the whatever, to simply say, this is how we, and I mean we, the community, the state, the families, the school, this is how we're going to work with each other. These are the expectations that we have. And we're going to develop ourselves so that when we come to that parent communication, both sides are aware of how we hope to engage with each other. We are going to be clearer about how we're going to deal with our discipline. It's all of that. It's having a sense, a groundedness, a steadiness, a clarity around processes and expectations, so that we're not adding additional it feels like fires because they're adding even more emotion to it. You know what I mean? And they're taking more time with it. And I think if we worked on ourselves a little bit more, and the cultural expectations, and I say culture of the school, I think we'd be in a better place. I'm hoping, I'm crossing my fingers.
Welcome to Corwin's Leaders Coaching Leaders podcast with hosts Peter DeWitt and Michael Nelson. This podcast is from education leaders for education leaders. Every week, Peter, Mike, and our guests get together to share ideas, put research into practice, and ensure that every student is learning not by chance, but by design.
Jen Abrams, welcome to the Leaders Coaching Leaders podcast.
I am so glad to be here.
It is so good to see you.
I know, it's good to see you, friend. Been a long time.
I know, we met like 12 years ago, I think, when
more.
Yeah, when we started working for Corwin and all of that stuff. So pretty fantastic.
Long time ago. Been a long time, and been following your work, and now with Michael following your work and the amazing things that you guys are doing. So glad to be here.
Well, thank you. But we're here to talk about you. So let's do that. You know, you are so well known for the art of conversation, right? Like having hard conversations, and that is so incredibly, it's just strange that it's still a huge issue. Mm-hmm. You know, there's just lots of research to show that if we don't feel trust with somebody, then we might stay away from a conversation. Vivian Robinson talked about, if we do have trust as a leader with the teachers we work with, we might take two routes. We might, like, if we're going to have a conversation with a teacher, we might come hard at them, or we might not even, we'll kind of talk around the issue. So, but we want to talk about one of your latest books that just came out a few years ago, called Stretching Your Learning Edges, Growing Up at Work, because this is profoundly important to, you know, the work that Michael and I do, but a lot to the work that school leadership teams and district leadership teams do. So talk to us a little bit about this book, Stretching Your Learning Edges.
So if I had sort of a sense of what I needed to do at the very, very beginning of my consulting and writing, I would have written this book first. I started with hard conversations because that was the thing that I was noticing people needed. And as that happened, and I wrote about it, I backed up and said, I wonder if prior to hard conversations, we need clarifying conversations. And from there, then I said, I wonder if we're in a culture, a school culture, where people are having conversations and are professional in any type of conversation. And that's where this book comes in. It's the idea of, we have credentials in how to teach, we have credentials in how to understand grade levels or subject areas. We do not have credentials in how to talk to adults. A lot of us don't. And leaders have more experience with that because that's what we're focusing on. But that concept of adult to adult communication in schools is, I think, sort of a place where we need to focus more. So what I started writing in 2021 during COVID was this book, which is about how do we create a professional, healthy learning culture in which the adults that are in a school system know how to work on their own inner talk, as well as really work on how to do the interpersonal talk. And that's where I talk about growing up at work, growing our capacities, our skills, looking at our mindset so that we are the adults at work and what that means. So that's where the book came from.
I've been fascinated by your work, and it's really an honor to meet you. And I love the banter between you and Peter, and the friendship and professionalism that the two of you share. And so, thanks for bringing me into the fold of this interview. Number one, Peter shared recently, "Hey, Mike, you need to look at or watch the movie Conclave," and so I watched it one evening, and in that movie there was a line, and I just had to pause it on my TV, and my wife, she just rolls her eyes. "Okay, what was just said that you need to talk about in a workshop, Mike?" It's like, okay, well, here we go, Britt. And the quote was, in Conclave, was, "Certainty is the enemy of unity."
Mhm.
And in your book, it really, you talk about suspending certainty
Mhm.
as
Yeah.
adults working together. Could you expand a little bit more on what you, and so as a result of that one quote, Peter and I have bantered about certainty and uncertainty. We've included it in our workshops. So yes, Britt, I did put it into my workshops, or our workshops, Peter, and we have used it, and it's been an engaging conversation. So
So yeah, that idea of our way is a way, it isn't the way.
mm,
And that idea of how do we inquire as much as advocate? And where might someone else have another angle that we on a problem, on an initiative, on a way to teach a lesson, on a way to message something to the community that we hadn't thought of because we all have blind spots. So the idea of I'm certain we need to go around down this route in this way, you got to stop and say, ask somebody, how do you see this? Where's my blind spot?
So, as you know, Peter and I have really been studying and exploring certainty and uncertainty, and what does that mean for leadership? And, in your book, you really talk about embracing uncertainty. What does that mean for leadership?
Mhm. This idea of suspending certainty
Mhm.
is it came from this idea that we advocate so much. We don't inquire enough.
Mhm.
And we need to recognize as leaders that we have a way, we don't necessarily have the way. Now, I am not suggesting that you shouldn't be certain to stop at a stop sign. And I'm not suggesting that there are moments when certainty and just a clarity of action is the right thing. There are also just moments in leadership where we need to be more in inquiry before we make decisions. So to ask, what am I not seeing? Where do I have a blind spot? What else am I not considering? That idea of suspending certainty is a piece I think that will allow for a gray to emerge, to not be just so black and white, and allow for other voices to come in. And it requires a sense of listening. It requires a strong stomach and an ego to be able to open to other people's points of view. But I think you're a better leader when you suspend in those moments that it's important that you suspend certainty to do it.
Yeah, I often think of certainty, uh, opposite. I was like, just remain curious
Mm-hmm.
and keep all of those, as you remain curious, keep all of those skills that you've had and learned in terms of pausing and reflecting and,
Mm-hmm.
in conversations, right there at the
Yeah.
forefront.
Yeah. I have in the book, it says having an appropriate sense of self-regard, keeping things in perspective, knowing
Mm.
you always don't know the bigger picture, and being able to manage yourself to be in that space of curiosity in moments of sort of stress and ambiguity in ways that model for other people, because that's really an important thing for all of us to do in a school.
If you build that collective type of culture,
Right.
oh, what you can transform for students.
It'd be super cool.
I feel like and there's a delicate balance there, right? Like I'm always concerned when we get called experts, when you're the experts coming in. I've never been comfortable with that whatsoever because I feel like Michael and I go into things as a learner. We go in
Right.
as learners. I mean, and that quite honestly makes we do a lot of long-term work. So, most of our work is long-term. And when we're facilitating or coaching, I feel like going in as a learner, we've learned so much from the people that we work with,
Sure.
as opposed to this constant pressure that, they're always we're the only ones who are going to be able to teach them something. I think we should always have that learner's mindset. But I also feel like from a leadership standpoint, and Mike, you must have felt like this at times too. There is that pressure on the part of leaders that people do look to you for answers as well. So finding that it's got to be hard, it is hard to find that delicate balance so you don't seem like, because you can quickly lose credibility too, right?
I think coming forward not with a blank piece of paper is something a leader can do, but
Mhm.
it's what the the what the leader does with that non-blank piece of paper when they begin to
Yes.
share and interact with it,
Mm.
and knowing, the three little pigs have always been important in my head as a leader of
Mhm.
straw, wood, brick. I'm not bringing this blank piece of paper as a brick design where I am not
Mhm.
open, I'm not
Mm.
curious to see what you think. It's really coming as a straw. But there is that ebb and flow of things because you can't just make all decisions with a group of 600 staff members. There is some leadership that does need to occur.
By the
Right.
way, I love that. I've never heard you use that before.
Well, there
That's
you go.
There
Look
you
at
go.
what we're
I
learning
know. Sorry, I didn't
on
mean
your
to
own.
like just drop that bomb, but I love that. That's fantastic.
Yeah. You are fantastic.
There you go.
We're learning every
So,
day.
folks, that's the end of our podcast today. For more tips from the three little pigs, please join us next episode
Okay,
with Jen
okay, don't make
Abrams
fun of
and
me for
Peter
giving
DeWitt.
you a compliment. See, Jen, this is what happens.
Yes, this
I
is
know
good.
you extremely well. Mike and I know each other extremely well, and now we're just going to air everything right here on the podcast. No, I just think that's a fantastic way of looking at it. I like that balance. Jen, one of the things we want to ask you is within the book on stretching your learning edges, you talk about kind of 5 different ways
Mhm.
that we can move forward. Could you explain those a little bit?
Yeah, it when I looked at the work that I've been doing since I was a teacher, at 22 and now becoming 58, there were 5 places I felt as I was a teacher, as I was a coach, as I was a professional developer, as I've been a consultant, all over that were useful places to grow the adults. One is to know our identities.
Mm,
So I'm not saying you have an identity and you can't change and you don't have multiple, you don't contain, a multiplicity. But that idea of what about your biases? What about your upbringing? What about your country of origin? What about your work style? How might knowing more about you and knowing more about others help you collaborate more effectively?
mm,
Second one was to spend certainty. How might we do that more often? Because our way is a way, not the way. One is to take responsibility, not just for our work product, but for our interactions. And how can we have hard conversations in humane ways? How can we express our concerns before they escalate to complaints? How might we apologize better? One is to build our resilience and our resiliency. I have the identity certainty, so I call it resiliency, so that we don't pig pen. And what I mean by that is there are moments when we need to take care of our emotional and psychological hygiene so that
mm,
we don't become the Peanuts character Pigpen and bring dust into interactions.
mm,
Not saying you shouldn't express yourself, but you have to manage ways to do that so that you are healthy for the group as well as yourself. All because fifth facet, we need to engage in reciprocity to be a value add to the team, and hopefully every team member is then a value add to you. So this concept of working on our group behaviors so that we can do that. Some of it is individual work, some of it is inner work, some of it is interpersonal work, but also to recognize you're a part of the group. And I've had new teachers say to me, "You want me to teach and now be nice to other adults? That's a lot." I've also had people say to me, "I don't know if I can do all of this. That's just really complicated." And I will say to them, which part of this do you not think is important for the collective? And they're like, yeah, good point, right? So I truly believe for us to grow as a profession, for us to have a healthy professional adult learning culture, these are 5 places that we need to develop ourselves.
Yeah, I would love to dive deeper into one more of those, maybe a little bit more. Definitely, it's a fantastic book. But the as Peter and I have been engaging across Canada and in North America and across the United States, in the last, let's say, 60 days, we see a new kind of I'm going to use the word hurting, and I don't know if that fully describes among our leaders. Um, and it's almost distracting them, their focus from student and staff learning into this hurting. So it's that pig pen effect that you talked about just a minute ago. So are are there strategies you might share with our listeners right now, knowing the time that we're in politically and so where some of the hurting is coming from in terms of some policy shifts and um, how might you respond to that?
I I think individually we need to work on our emotional hygiene so we're healthy for ourselves. And if that means that we need to have support, we need to meditate, we need to do all that individually, it's it's essential. Self-care or well-being at this point isn't like, oh, it's a nice to have.
Mm.
And my colleague who works in Africa but works internationally, Kristen Pontius, was just looking at the research around how essential our development of our inner strength is right now and our well-being. That's one piece. Okay. And we can talk about just the work that I encourage people to do and the support that I encourage people to get. The other piece, though, is about the expectation in the school that I think would also help individual well-being is we collectively have an expectation that each one of us work on managing our capacity to deal with ambiguity, that we work on sustaining our own commitment to the work, and we try our best not to pigpen and emotionally pollute, and I talk about it as emotional pollution, the the collective or the teams that we're on. Lots of people have pushed back on me and said, "Are you suggesting we be performatively professional? Are you suggesting we can't be authentic? What if we have a feeling? What if we want to cry? What if we want to yell?" And I I'm I'm not discounting that we have big feelings and that we need to find places to express that. What I know, and I was just reading Chase Milky's blog today, there's complaining, and then there's venting for to to kind of process, and then you have to progress. So he talked about this idea of what's next. So how can we develop the skills to articulate our concerns before they escalate to pollute and be complaints? So there has to be both your inner work as a leader and then an expectation for the teams to, it sounds it sounds so diminishing, to read the room, to really say, is this the right place to express this, and in what ways might this be helpful, so that there's a collective and also an individual obligation to grow. It's
I no,
I love that.
all of it. Yeah, I love. Um, One of the reasons why I love working with Mike is because when we do collaborate, because we often he'll be coaching on his own or running a workshop on his own. And I do might be doing my own thing, but when we actually come together and we get to facilitate together, it really is about reading the room, but it's somebody helping me read the room. So if I'm the one leading the discussion at that point, he's the one coming to me to kind of give me feedback. When he's leading the room, I'm coming to give him feedback. But part of what you were saying too, when it came to the self-awareness part, let's be clear, when we say leader, we mean teachers too, because it's
everybody.
about self-regulation, right? Mark Brackett's work. We will usually use the Mark Brackett's
Cast out.
mood thing at the beginning. Sorry, I'm not being very articulate right now. And we use Mentimeter for people to anonymously tell us how they're feeling in the room. And then we often talk about, we've got people who are feeling anxious. We've got people who are feeling sad. We've got people who are feeling depressed today. What can we do as facilitators to help get them out of it or help move them into a different direction? And so when we're coming together as a team, it is our responsibility to be in charge of ourselves, but also understand how we're impacting the team. Because, and you and I were talking about this with Mike before we started recording. I've been doing a lot of that work around chatter and think before you speak, because I have a negative voice that will come in and just say, Peter, you're a loser. I can't believe you couldn't get that today. That kind of stuff. I do have that negative self-talk. And the book about, don't think everything or don't believe everything you think is really about the intersection between thoughts and thinking. Thoughts are neutral. Thoughts are what come to us all the time. Thinking is what we actually do about it. And so what's even equally as important to what you're talking about when it's the self-awareness piece is that I need to be self-aware that if I have a good relationship with you, but a bad one with Mike, and we're both on the same team, or I don't have trust for Mike and I have trust for you, Mike's going to come up with an idea and I might instantly think that's a bad idea, because the thinking I have on the thoughts that are coming to my mind because of my relationship with Mike are going to be negative. But if you come up with something positive, if you come up with an idea, the thoughts that come to my head, I'm going to turn those into positive thinking. So this whole self-awareness piece is also about really understanding, why am I feeling the way that I'm feeling? Is this factual, or am I making the story up in my head? Because we're all guilty of being able to do that. And that's what makes what you said so powerful, Jen, because it's really about just understanding, how to come together with dignity. We can still have all the feelings. And we interviewed Tim Schreiber for this season as well. And he has the dignity index. We can talk, we can disagree, we can have different thoughts, but we have to also keep ourselves in check in a way that we can do all of this work with dignity as well.
Mhm.
Does
I,
that fit into it?
I completely agree with you. And I've written down chatter. That's like, because we're learning from each other, and I've written down the
Yeah.
dignity. The adult capacity to manage emotions, to be self-aware, to interact in respectful ways, we didn't necessarily develop that at the level that we needed to in our credential program.
Mm.
Double down on the challenges that we're facing right now, and we need to grow up. I mean, we need to grow ourselves to be able to do that. And so, what you're saying about self-awareness and honoring where we're at, but then to also be able to manage ourselves is going to contribute to the collective, to collective efficacy. And that's why I'm always saying individual efficacy, individual resourcefulness is going to have a substantial um, influence on a collective and a team being able to do their work. Most leaders, and I totally understand this given time limits, given 2 or 3 days of PD, right, will say, I have to just count on all my adults to be adult. They're over the age of 18. They signed a contract. We know what we're doing. We can't grow the adults. We have to look at the work for the kids. And I say, and how's that working for us?
Mhm.
Maybe we need to spend just a little bit more time reinforcing and developing some skills that we just need even more now than ever before. And not not shame adults for not knowing. You're supposed to be mature. Why don't you know this already? And I know that leaders are sometimes really frustrated. Do you want to be right or effective?
Mhm.
We need to be much more compassionate with those who might be older than we are on our
Mhm.
faculties, who might be new at 23 and are growing up in this particular time. Do we want to do what's right by kids? We need to grow adults. And
Mhm.
that's been my focus. And so that's why I'm so glad I get to talk about it with you guys.
Well, Jen,
Recently, we were engaged in a leadership team
yeah.
meeting, Jennifer, and they were talking. What kept coming up is, well, we can't do that. We're fighting fires constantly. And when the third or fourth person said, we're fighting fires constantly, Peter and I just kind of tried to frame a question about what exactly does fires mean? And can you give examples of fires? And they were talking about student discipline, and they were talking about parent communication, or upset parents, or parents coming in and challenging school policies on different things. And I can't help but think all of what you said, the buckets of the individual first and then the collective. I almost want like this third, stakeholders, or communication with stakeholders, and how that would help put out those fires, or be a proactive stance rather than reactive to the fires that is not allowing them to do the work. Does that make sense?
It makes perfect sense. And makes
Yeah.
perfect sense. And the mindset, the courage, the whatever, to simply say, this is how we, and I mean we, the community, the state, the families, the school, this is how we're going to work with each other. These are the expectations that we have. And we're going to develop ourselves so that when we come to that parent communication, both sides are aware of how we hope to engage with each other. We are going to be clearer about how we're going to deal with our discipline. It's all of that. It's having a sense, a groundedness, a steadiness, a clarity around processes and expectations, so that we're not adding additional I mean, it feels like fires because they're adding even more emotion to it. You know what I mean? And they're taking more time with it. And I think if we worked on ourselves a little bit more, and the cultural expectations, and I say culture of the school, I think we'd be in a better place. I, I'm hoping, I'm crossing my fingers. So
Yeah,
that's,
and I agree because one of the things we said to them is it possible that people are adding to their own fires? That
correct.
people are spending time in that space because there's something they're getting out of it,
Mhm.
or it's preventing them from going to a place where they feel uncomfortable. So they're going to spend time over here instead. And so,
Yeah.
Jen, we could talk forever.
I-
It is so good to see you. I feel like it is good for the soul just to talk to you, because I'm going to be walking away sort of thinking of that chatter inside about, self-regulation and all of those kind of pieces. But it's really important. It just goes to show that the social emotional side is equally as important as the academic side, right? When we're, they are just what you did, they're all interrelated. So the book is called Stretching Your Learning Edges, Growing Up at Work. And where can they find that, Jen?
It's a really good question. I would suggest you go to my website, jenniferabrams.com, where if you cannot get to it, which is under books, and then you can link to it, find me. We are in the process, speaking of all the transformation and the bumps and the transitions that are happening in the world right now, to making sure that somebody on my coast of the US, which is California, is going to be able to ship that out for me. So just go to jenniferabrams.com and you'll get it there.
Jennifer, always good to see you. Thank you for being on the Leaders Coaching Leaders podcast.
You guys, much appreciated.
It's great to be with you. Thank you.